Hello, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's coming to you on the fourth day of August 2014. Oh, excuse me, 2021. I got too many things on my mind here. Time on deck is 1000 hours Central Daylight Time. And my friends, I've got a special guest today. Our special guest is John Hollerman. John Hollerman is president of Grid Down Consulting. John Hollerman has been working for some time advising people about what to do to survive a grid down situation. He's got several books and other products. He's got a website. We'll try to go take a look at that website before long. And what we're going to do is he gave, I told y'all before, I'm participating in 2 national level power grid defense committees. One of them is called Secure the Grid. And John Hollerman came on that committee meeting and gave a real good description of what to expect, as a nation if the power grid goes down. Now, I've talked to you about that several times myself, but guys, you probably get tired of hearing me say it. So I thought it'd be a fresh voice to get somebody else in here who's really eloquent, really good at describing this. And John Hollerman absolutely fits that bill. He is a very good professional in this area. And what you might want to know, he's an Air Force veteran. He got out of the Air Force and when he was in the Air Force, he served in survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. He was an instructor for that area, for that discipline. And so he's ideally suited to tell us about the things that we're looking for today. And before I bring him on real fast, I just want to add one thing, guys. We know with all the stuff going on in the world today that we've got to be ready. I tell everybody to be prepared, not scared. And we're going to talk about preparation in this video. But if you go to prepwithgreg.com, you can get a special off right now, $300 for a 3-month supply of long-term food storage. It lasts 25 years. And guys, that's hard to beat. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. 2,000 calories a day make you a winner. Or if you get the 1-month supply, you get 25% off, which is around $74. So guys, you can't beat that. That's a slight weight, easy to store, easy to carry. Hard to beat. Anyway, enough said with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you John Hollerman. John, tell us about yourself a little bit first.
Hey, Greg, thanks a lot for having me on today. You mentioned I was a former United States Air Force SEER instructor. SEER stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. I've written 4.5 books. I co-authored one. The first book I wrote was a series called EMP, Equipping Modern Patriots, A Story of Survival. And I also have a #1 bestseller in preparedness genre. It's called Survival Theory, a Preparedness Guide. All of my books have been in the top 10 bestsellers list on Amazon. And that kind of put me on the map. My background in survival in SEER. I think a lot of people just kind of resonated with my philosophies and the direction I was recommending people go. I started Grid Down Consulting here about 8 years ago. I don't know of anybody else in the country that's worked with more individuals than I have. I've worked with probably over 500 different families. I've personally analyzed and made recommendations on over 100 survival retreats. I've built over a dozen from the ground up, very large retreats, some smaller. So that's my background. So I'm also a member of the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, which used to meet. They closed it up now. We make too much noise apparently, but it was headed up by General Quast down at Maxwell Air Force Base, Mabee Wargaming Center. And it was a 3-day wargaming event for 2 years straight on the EMP threat, solar flare threat, basically a grid down scenario. And that was an extremely eye-opening experience for me because I knew the government wasn't prepared. I knew that the Americans weren't prepared and the electric industry wasn't prepared. But when I attended that event, I was really blown away at the level of there literally is no plan for the United States government, for the United States military. They're not hardened. The United States military has 99% of their military bases rely on the civilian electric grid. They have enough backup generation power for 48 hours. They have reported to Congress in the event of a commercial grid down event in the country, they would not be able to respond to the societal collapse that would happen. And that's basically where you're at. There is no plan. So those of you that are sitting out there thinking that, it's going to be like the movie Contagion or some movie where there's going to be box trucks rolling down, passing out MREs, that's never going to happen. So if we do have a nationwide grid down event, either from an EMP, a solar flare, cyber attack, or a physical attack on the grid, if it's a nationwide grid down event, there is no cavalry coming. So if you get nothing else, take that. You can take that to the bank.
Amen on that. No cavalry coming. A lot of people are expecting they're going to get all kind of help, and you know, they just don't realize the depth to which the disparity will grow in the grid down, how much they rely on the grid. I've done a couple of videos on this. One, I said a grid down would be worse than a full-scale nuclear war, as if the new full-scale nuclear war didn't take the grid down, which it would, of course, with the EMP.
Right.
That would be part of it. But the EMP side of it is so catastrophic that most people can't imagine. And I've told Dr. Peter Pry that his EMP task force estimates on 9 out of 10 people expiring within a year was optimistic. And I kind of laid it out to him based on what you'd expect from the spent fuel rod pools. Forget about that. Everybody thinks about the reactors. The spent fuel rod pools are a worse story than the reactors at these nuclear power plants. And then you factor in, they figured all the farmers were growing their own food. Well, no, most of them don't these days.
No.
You know, I've surveyed farms, and I'm finding only 1 out of 8 really has a garden to speak of. You know, they might have a little a couple of tomato plants or something.
I think that's overly optimistic. I think you must be in a high gardening area, because I can drive, and I think it's less than, I'm sure it's far less than that. And here's the other thing. I have country people all the time say, well, I know how to garden. Okay, great. Have you ever lived an entire year off your garden? Do you have a root cellar? Do you understand the concept of how to store enough food to get through a winter to the following harvest season? Do you have enough canning jars? Do you have, so, I mean, most people that plant a small garden do it as residual vegetables to offset the food they buy from the store, right? So even people that know how to garden have no concept of how much food you have to grow and store to live off of for a year. So I hear that all the time. Well, I know how to garden. I'm just going to garden when this happens, and, you know, we'll just live off our garden. Well, that's great. But unless you've ever done it, there's no take backs. There's no rebates. You screw it up and you don't live the first year, right? There's no freebies. There's no mistakes.
Exactly.
You can't run down to the store and get, you know, if the beetles are eating something, you can't run down there and get some kind of spray to spray the beetles, you know, on your plants, neem oil or whatever.
There's no store. And that's
Right.
one of the reasons I teach people about the worm farming aspects and using vermiculture to make up for the fact that you can't run to the store. When I tell people to buy, you know, heirloom seeds, the seed, you got to buy seeds that you can replant. You just go buy any seed from the store, you're not going to get back what you planted, because a lot of those are hybrid seeds. And I've got a good source. I got my videos. I've got links on most of them except the live chats like these. I post links to True Leaf Market. You know, I got an affiliate marketing deal with them, and they got an excellent source of seeds. And I buy a lot of seeds from myself from my.
So I've seen a lot of your videos, Greg, and the problem is you know what you're doing. Most people that buy heirloom seeds and they're like, oh, I'll just harvest seeds next year. The harvesting seeds, as you know, and you have to lay them out. You have to dry them to a certain moisture content. Every seed's different. How you process each seed, how you store each seed. If you mess it up again on year 2 for year 3, no plants, right?
Exactly.
I'm with you on the heirloom seeds and redoing them. In my opinion, that's one of the biggest overlooked things with my clients is they'll go out and they'll buy a survival seed vault from My Patriot Supply or this or that, and they think they're covered. I'm like, you got $100,000 worth of guns and ammunition. Spend $500, $1,000 on seed. So, my perspective on seeds. So I agree with you, and knowing how to harvest seeds and reprocess them for the following years is so vitally important, but that's also a skill you have to practice. In my opinion on survival seeds, Greg, is the best seed for your area. I don't care if it's genetically modified with rat tails. If it's the most hardy plant with the most disease resistance, the most pest resistance, buy 10,000 seeds for $50 and then never have to worry about processing seeds and just plant them every year. So if that, most of those end up being an heirloom seed for most people, but yeah, I'm with you. A lot of people talk the talk, but if you've never done it, you're kind of rolling the dice if you just have one of those seed vaults in your freezer and you think you're going to pull them out and then live off that food. And I've seen your videos, it's a lot. It takes years of practice to learn how to do that, especially like you said, you can't run down to the store to get fertilizer or sprays or neem oil or whatever you're using for pesticides. You could have something come in and wipe out your entire crop.
Deer.
Powdery mildew wiped me out one year. So it's, yeah.
Well, you could have a hailstorm wipe everything out too.
Yeah.
So you've got, what the old timers did is they grew a lot more than they needed. And they put it up. They stored it. They stored a lot. And I knew families when I grew up, every farm had a garden, big garden, and they would store up, some of them up to 7 years worth of canned jars of food, and they would have a lot of it. And I knew people had big families and they'd have a huge area for storing their food.
Right.
And they took it serious, and they did okay with that, because that's just the way it used to be. It wasn't called survival or prepping. It was just the way of life.
It's common sense is what it was called.
Yeah, exactly. It's called being thrifty, being smart.
Yeah.
And now we call it prepping and hoarding and all kind of crazy idiotic
right.
things. But it should be a way of life. And yeah, you got to practice. I've told people, I've got people on my channel who got on to me for doing, preppers don't like the gardening videos a lot of times. And I said, look, guys, you all got the big guns that you referred to, and you spend all the money on that stuff. But I said, hey, when the grid goes down, you're going to run out of game bigger than environment in a matter of just a couple of months. The only thing that you're going to be able to aim at's a little bird or a squirrel or a rat. And when you go pow on that, all you're going to get is a puff of fur.
That's right. I always get a chuckle from the lone wolves that are going to take their monster bug out bag that they probably can't carry and hike off into the national forest and live off the land. First of all, 99%, because I've actually done that. That was what I did in the military, was teach survival and evasion to pilots and navigators. 99% of the people that say they're going to do that don't have the skills. But even if you're part of the one, I say this in like most of my neighbors, even if you're part of that 1% where you could convince me, you were dropped off on the side of the road in Alaska and raised by a pack of wolves. Yeah, like you actually have the life skills to do that. You can't convince me about the other 99 yahoos to your one that are running around the same patch of woods that you are, fighting for the last piece of fur in the forest because everything's wiped out down to the rats and the mice are eaten. Everything, we have game season in this country for a reason. And it's just, there's not going to be anyone out there. So even if you can convince me that you could survive in today's environment, like, hey, I go out backpacking, I spend a month on this trail or that trail, that's great. But you're not counting for the fact that there's going to be a ton of other people doing the same thing you are, and you got to sleep sometime. You're going to have to build a fire sometime to heat yourself, to heat water, to cook your food. Let's say you do get something to eat, or you do kill something. You don't think that's going to bring moths to the flame in the forest. It's just a matter of time to some dude in a tree stand takes your head off to find out what's in your pack. So lone wolf in it is, living off the national forest is the surest way to get yourself killed within the first couple of weeks.
Well, what you become the long pork.
Yeah, that's right.
You become the game. When all the other game is gone, you are the game. Don't be the long pork. That's what I tell people. So, yeah, it's not a pretty situation, and people really got to think this through more than a lot of people think they got it covered, and they really don't, because they don't realize. Just why don't you take us through what do you see in a grid down? You tell us in your knothole what you think is going to happen. Just walk us through it.
Okay, so I discuss a lot of this in my book, Survival Theory, on the different philosophies that people have for prepping. So to start off with, there's what you would consider different levels of prepping, right? So, I mean, you have the people down in Florida that are getting ready for a hurricane. They're putting a case of water and some spare batteries in their basement. That's not prepping. If you live in Hurricane Alley, or if you live down there somewhere in Tornado Alley or something, that's common sense stuff to do, right? Preparedness and prepping is really being ready for a much longer event, right? So if basically, if you're into preparedness for short-term disasters, you can kind of take a lot of the stuff I say as a grain of salt. So in my opinion, it's not my opinion, in my expert opinion, the number one threat to this country, and also one of the most likely threats, is a extended nationwide blackout of our electric grid. Part of the reason is it's not covered by the media. It's looked at as kind of a conspiracy theory type of subject. You know, oh, you know, how could you be without electricity? And I know you've covered it in videos, so I'll just, you know, just touch on the basics. The high voltage transformers in this country, they're 300 to 400 metric tons a piece. They take 18 months to build from South Korea or in Germany, and they only replace about 12 a year. If they take out 350 to 3,000, it would only take them taking out 9 of our high voltage transformers to cause a nationwide blackout. But if an EMP, a solar flare, cyber attack, if they were able to destroy a large percentage or even a lot of our high voltage transformers, it's going to be at minimum 12 to 18 months before the lights come back on. And so when I mention that, a lot of people, their eyes kind of glaze over, and they, you know, we'll bust out the Monopoly board, we'll burn some candles like we do the last time the power went out, but they don't really understand the catastrophic nature of what's coming. You're talking no food, no internet, no banking, no radios, no interstate trucking, no food distribution, no farming, because people are like, oh, the farmers, 90% of the major farms in this country have like GPS run tractors, and everything is a finely tuned machine. So when you swipe a can of beans at the grocery store, there's a computer in that cash register that tells the distribution center to put another can of beans on the next truck. The distribution center computer tells the canning facility, put another can of beans on the next truck. The canning facility tells the farm over in California, put some more beans on the next truck. All this stuff is all electrical signals that are going everywhere. And all the trucking is all run by computers and networks and everything like that. In a nationwide grid down event, everything stops where it's at today. So what you basically have is the food that's in your grocery stores down the road from you. When that's gone in 3 days, it's never getting replenished. And I already mentioned earlier that the United States military is not coming to feed you. And at the EDTF, one of the biggest things, it is factually, fundamentally, 100% unequivocally impossible to feed 350 million Americans in this country without electricity. It cannot happen. Especially if you're in a city, in a large metropolitan area. It's going to get bad there first. It's going to get bad everywhere. But the way the food is delivered, just in time delivery to each of the grocery stores to keep everybody fed, you stop that, things are going to go bad real quickly. So people point to different catastrophes and short-term things, natural disasters, Hurricane Katrina, this and that. Well, look how this happened and this happened and this happened. The problem is this is unprecedented, because in every situation, you always had somebody coming to rescue the people that were involved in that scenario. There was this, you know, outside this, whatever, Superdome down in New Orleans, you had CNN crews with cameras telling people the trucks are on the way, the water's on their way, the helicopter, they're coming, they'll be here within the day. You still had rapes, murders, disaster, you know, people killing each other, and just all kinds of terrible things happening. And that in
3 days,
within 3 days.
But the key thing is that's a pocket. That's when you have a disaster in one local area. We're talking nationwide.
Nationwide. That's right.
I got the same problem.
And there's not going to be any way to keep people calm, to tell them what's happening, to let them know that the government's coming to help them, which they're not, and they can't, and they're not going to be able to. So it's going to get very ugly very quick. I recommend my clients, if you live in a big city, you need to get out within 3 days. So I talked about lone wolves a minute ago. The second kind of pet peeve of mine is a lot of what I would consider the urban prepping channels, where they teach you how to turn your house in suburbia into a prepper fortress, put a 6-foot fence around your backyard and garden in your backyard, and throw some trash in the front yard, spray paint your door and your windows, and no one's going to think you're living there. You're out of your mind. If you think your neighbors, you know, 2 weeks into this thing, when they're starving, aren't going to be peeking over your fence and figuring out what you have, if you're hoarding up supplies in a major city, you're basically going to feed the biggest guy on the block when he walks over your lifeless body to eat your food and do whatever else to your family. So and I know I'm painting a pretty bleak picture here, but so one of the things that is categorically what I see in the American preparedness community is an astronomical, it's hard to even explain how bad the misunderstanding on three basic topics: human desperation, starvation, and living without rule of law. So living without rule of law, it's all, you know, everything's about guns and I'm going to shoot the guy in the face that comes through my door and all that other stuff. Okay, whatever. But the big one is starvation. Even the preparedness people, even the preparedness experts with the 200,000 people on the YouTube channel don't understand what starvation does to a human being, because we've cleansed from world history things about the Holocaust and the Warsaw Ghetto. We've cleansed the Holodomor from Ukraine. We've cleansed Mao's famine in China. We've cleansed all these horrific, horrible atrocities like the Balkan Wars and the starvation and what people are capable of doing when they're starving, hungry, desperate. And most preparedness people treat a post-collapse, a grid down scenario, thinking, you know, I'm going to barter with my neighbors and this and that. Every human interaction you have in that scenario, when people are starving and desperate, they've got an 8-year-old kid laying on the couch. He's gray because he's malnourished and he's on his deathbed. You can't trust anything that anybody tells you. Everybody's going to be sizing you up to see how many notches of your belt you've tightened. You know, everybody's sizing everybody up. And your best chance of surviving a grid down collapse is to get as far away from people as possible. And I don't mean, you know, on the backside of a mountain range in Montana somewhere. I mean, that's fine if you know how to live like that, but you need to get tucked away and try and stay clear of people as long as possible. So one of the high recommendations I would recommend is, one of the top recommendations I recommend everybody read is a book called The Dark Secrets of SHTF by Selko Begovic. He's a guy that actually lived through a year-long in a city that was stripped of food. It was surrounded by the enemy. They cut off all their food resupply. And he basically goes through the atrocities that happen when neighborhood joins with neighborhood and street by street and family by family, people using old people to cross the street for human shields, bloated bodies all throughout the streets, and the smells, drinking water out of the back rain gutter and everybody getting sick. That's a good wake-up call for people. The other thing I would recommend is doing some research on the Minnesota starvation experiment. It's 1,000 pages of medical research. It was a experiment that was done in the 1943, I believe. Ansel Keys during World War II. Conscientious objectors volunteered to be starved to kind of see how they would react. And if you look at the results of that study, I mean, they were hurting themselves. They could not function mentally. They were becoming unhuman, basically. And if you read through the results of what they went through and like how bad it was for them during that 6 months, and then you go back and you look at the fact that they were fed twice a day, every day on schedule. They were given 1,500 calories a day. Most people's long-term food plans don't even have that. So they weren't starved. They were given a half rations at 1,500 calories a day. And I don't know if you can see this, but they lost all kinds of weight. Their mental capacity went. They were safe. They had radios. They had entertainment. They knew their family was safe. They weren't desperate. They had doctors pouring over them every course of the day to make sure their lives weren't in danger. So to see their psychological response to 1,500 calories a day for 6 months, and people think that, you know, it's just going to be a walk in the park. And anyways, I'm getting long-winded here, Greg. You're gonna have to learn to reel me in, brother. Reel me in.
Well, I did a video recently on starvation. I think one of the photos I used for my thumbnail came from that group study. And that's interesting because they had all kind of problems. Even though they were secure they really weren't going to starve to death. They were being watched and monitored. They kind of fell apart. And that's very instructive. And like you said, they actually had half rations, so they weren't really starving. They were, somewhat deprived. But
Right.
their level of deprivation is beyond what most people are planning for.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And or what a lot of people can obtain. So a lot of people, they get on to me for, I get people get mad at me for broken that long-term food storage. And it's like, really? I tell them, hey guys, I do videos on telling you how to eat free from the weeds and the trees. And I've actually done a couple of videos showing what to go get at the big box stores. But when it boils down and this stuff happens, if you ain't got it, don't be the toilet paper prepper trying to run the box store at the last minute, because if the grid's down, there ain't no box stores.
That's right.
And the best, they got a 3-day supply. So you're going to be up the creek with no paddle, to use our old Southern lingo here. You're going to be in serious kimchi. Being a veteran, you know what I'm talking about.
I do
a lot. Well, kimchi's rather good. I love it. But guys, this is the thing that you just really, really got to plan out what you're going to need and figure out how to get it to support yourself and your family. You got to figure out what to do. The best option is to be able to bug in. If you're near a city, bugging in it's you're the long port. If you're in a national park, you're the long port. You better figure out some other way to do this. I've got 40 acres in Arizona, but I'm not going to be out there probably for about a year because I got some other things I got to do in the meantime. I'd hope we got it there sooner, but it's just the money and everything to set that place up is a bit of a challenge. So, but it's high desert, but it's got a great aquifer, so I can grow stuff once I get the well put in and get some solar power on it. But hopefully people won't be fleeing to the desert to hunt people, and there's a lot of people around there with big long bang bangs to defend the place. A lot of veterans in the area there, which is a good thing. I like being in a community of veterans. As a veteran myself, it's always good to talk to a fellow veteran here, but a lot of people just don't have a sense of reality for how bad it can be. One thing that I'd like to add to that you talked about, not having the tractors and the trucks because of the computers. You won't even have fuel. If they didn't need the computer one, you're not going to have fuel and you're not going to have water because these things are pumped with electricity.
That's right.
There are parts in the supply chain to run these trucks, and these trucks break down all the time, are in stores that use computers to maintain the inventory and to order new parts. They can't even, the cash registers are computerized. Everything's computerized these days everywhere.
Most people in town, they're on, if you're on city sewer, and each town's different, but that sewage is going to start backing up into everybody's houses. Your house is going to get filled with methane, and most houses in suburban areas are not going to be habitable. So if you're prepping in a city, you're going to have no water. And so I have a chapter in my book called basically what it takes to get firewood to boil water, right? And it's just a mental exercise that goes down the risk of every time you step out your door, you could get shot. And how far are you going to have to go to get wood to burn? And then what happens when you create smoke? What happens when you do boil water? What happens when you do put some of that freeze-dried food in there and your neighbor's kid that hasn't eaten in 2 weeks, right, is smelling that food from across the fence? You think they're not coming for your food? What, you're going to shoot your neighbor? And that's the other thing. So the alpha dog, big, I'm just going to shoot everybody that comes for my food mentality. They always think it's going to be like The Walking Dead, where, you're going to have these people running across the open field and you're just going to pick them off as they come at you. First of all, it's not going to be zombies. Second of all, it's most likely not going to be nameless, faceless people. Most likely it's going to be people that you blab to, because the first rule of prepping is don't talk about prepping and what you're personally doing. And all these people are talking about what they're doing, with their friends around the water cooler, because it's a cool subject, and I'm doing this, and I got this food stored up and all this other stuff. And they have these prepping groups, and they're talking on forums, and everybody else is saying they have food when they actually didn't put their money where their mouth was and actually stored up the food, or they bought a cheaper long-term food plan. They only have a fraction of the calories and they run out in a week. And then guess what? The people that are coming at your door to take your food, they're going to be your cousin. They're going to be your coworkers. They're going to be people that you're friends with and family members. The idea of just you're going to pull up and shoot them in the face is just, it doesn't go that way, right? So you got to keep your stuff that you're doing private, your locations private. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be family members, friends. First, that's the first wave. The second wave is going to be the gangs, and somewhere along the way, you're going to get that rogue sniper out there who's just going to hide somewhere. You're not going to see him, but he's going to see you. Just when you walk outside to take a leak because your sewer in the house isn't working, your commodes aren't working, so you step outside to take care of business, and well, he takes care of you.
Yeah, I think a lot of, and so again, it comes back to a lot of people in the preparedness community are focused on the polar caps or the magnetic, I'm not saying right, magnetic poles reversing and super volcanoes and a lot of these things, and even, things that may or may not happen. A nationwide grid down event is so horrific because you have 350 million people literally starving to death slowly over the course of a month. And I think a lot of people in America, because we've had peace for so long, there's been rule of law. We're the richest country in the world. People don't starve here in this country. If you want food, you go to your local church, you go to your food pantry, you go get on welfare. You can get food. Nobody in this country is really starving unless there's some strange external circumstances. So they're not going to be able to, a lot of times they'll point to like Mogadishu or this or that. Those people grew up hungry. When there's a famine there, that's like, there was a famine 2 years ago. You know what I mean? They're mentally prepared to handle it. Americans are not. And this idea that, people are just going to work together and sing Kumbaya. Yeah, maybe the first week, maybe the first 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Every man for himself at that point. I don't care about your mutual assurance groups, whatever kind of agreements you have. What's going to happen is a lot of times I'm seeing these people in the suburbs and the cities join forces on their cul-de-sac, and you got like one head honcho guy. It's a leader. He's leading the events, and they're getting people together, and they're making plans how they're going to defend their neighborhood. And in most every case that I've seen, that one guy is the only guy that's got food. That guy's the only guy that's really got. Everybody else bought like a 2-week supply of food, or they have this, or they have that, or they have this, just a little tiny bit. They've talked a big talk and they're interested. It's a fun thing to sit around the campfire and the barbecue and talk about. But when it actually comes to taking $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000, $8,000 and buying a year's worth of food for your family, they don't do it. And so what happens is that guy, okay, when it all comes down to it, they're going to be knocking on his door, and they know he has food. And we're friends. Why aren't you sharing your food? My kid's starving to death. Well, I bought. They're not going to care that you paid for it before. You're part of their group now. They're going to insist that you share your food with them. And if you don't, they are going to come and take it. So these are things that like people. So I guess I'm kind of going down different rabbit trails here, but the thing that everybody really needs to get an understanding of, I'm getting ready to release a list of books that I recommend on starvation. Selko Begovic, The Dark Secret of SHTF Survival. You got a book here, Execution by Hunger, The Hidden Holocaust. Love Thy Neighbor, a war story about the Balkan Wars. Final Stamp. This is about the Warsaw Ghetto and the Jewish doctors in the Warsaw Ghetto that did a big study on starvation. Here's notes from the Warsaw Ghetto. That's really good. Here's the Red Famine, Stalin's war on the Ukraine. Red Famine, a lot of good information in there. Mao's Great Famine. Okay, there's another great book, The Diary of Mary Berg. Hungry Ghost. I could keep pulling books out here.
How many people did Mao starve?
What's that?
And how many people did Mao starve?
Well, we don't know for sure, but it's somewhere between 20 and 40 million people. And the 20 and 40 million people, there were 8 to 9 million Jews killed in the Holocaust. Mao starved 20 to 40 million people. Same with Stalin starved, I think it was somewhere between 10 and 20 million. So more people, far more people I forget it's like 10 or 15 times as many people have died from starvation than from all the wars combined in history. So starvation and the terrible things that happen. So I think a lot of Americans think like, you know, we've evolved. We're America. We're somehow more civilized than the caveman. No, you're still a Homo sapien. You're still a human. Okay. If the reason we live in such a civilized society is because of all of our laws and law enforcement, police, and, people don't want to go out and do something bad because they know that they don't want to go to jail, right? You take that away when there's no police, there's no military, there's no rules. It's every man for himself. You make your own rules. It will be Viking days. It will be caveman days. It'll be the guy with the biggest club that's going to rule the roost. So I guess my point is I'm not trying to really scare everybody, but if you really want to get serious about your preparedness before you start buying a bunch of stuff and making plans, educate yourself on the threat first. Educate yourself on the grid down scenario. Educate the threat. Educate yourself on what starvation and human desperation and starvation looks like in living in a world without rule of law. Those are things to really wrap your head around. Because I'm sorry, but a lot of there's YouTube prepper experts out there with hundreds of thousands of people that just, I'm not going to name anybody. They're totally clueless on this subject, right? Of starvation, because they're Americans and they've never been overseas. They've never seen it. They've never been starved before.
And
so,
amen. Hey, you know what? General Krosniak, you probably know him. I've had him on my channel. He's been to both my Power Grid Defense conferences. When he was in Croatia, he kind of freaked out because the woods were just so quiet. It was just something strange. He couldn't figure out what it was. And he figured out there is no wildlife at all, not even a bird. It was just empty because the people there were hungry. They wiped out everything.
That's right.
In very short order.
Yeah, I've known General Krosniak very well. I'm very close to General Krosniak for a couple of years. He's one of probably the closest people in this industry that I know and I talk to regularly, and he's told me quite a few stories from. What's that?
Part of this Impact America, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, yeah. So he's the Balkan Wars is a good one to look into, and what happened there, like you just mentioned, there's a lot of atrocities. I think people just think it can't happen here, right? Normalcy bias. They're just so used to walking outside the door and having a sane, rational conversation with every human they come in contact with. And the fact of the matter is if you take people's food away, because I've seen it in SEER, that was one of the things we did. It was a 6-day, well, it was an 18-day course, but the 6 days that was out in the field, as soon as we got the pilots, navigators, the SF guys, as soon as we got them out there, we took away we limited how much food they got. We took away their sleep. We put them in stressful situations. We kept them up late at night. I didn't have a single class that I carried where I didn't have a full-grown man break down bawling on the ground. And I'm not denigrating any of those guys. I'm just saying that the psychological effects of taking people's food away, it's just something that's just so vastly misunderstood. Another great book that I recommend is world-renowned psychologist Philip Zimbardo wrote a book called The Lucifer Effect. If you don't know who Philip Zimbardo is, he did that Stanford prison experiment, which is another great thing to look into, where they, you're probably familiar with that, Greg, right? Where they took the college kids in the campus and they made half them prisoners and half them guards, and they just stepped back and filmed them, and they had to stop the experiment early because it, went out of control. So he wrote a book called The Lucifer Effect, How Good People Can Commit Evil Atrocities. So again, yeah.
And there's been a few studies along that line, including the electrical shock experiments and things like that, where people will follow the word of authority. I mean, we're talking Americans.
Milgram study. Yep.
We think we're so much above all this stuff, but people forget that before World War II, Germans were some of the most educated, highly developed people in the world. And look what they fell into. They fell into a fascist nation led by a despot. That but the times were good for them at first. They thought they were having prosperity, but it led to their utter complete destruction.
Yep.
So, but then again, there's normalcy bias. They couldn't imagine what was coming, and people here can't imagine what could be coming either. And So, no, I saw a comment earlier on some time back. It's not going to happen. You know, they don't believe the grid's going to go down. There are several root causes that can bring down our power grid easily. And if we don't get, and we're not really doing anything to get the grid hardened, contrary to what PBS and some of these other people are out there saying. One is the sun. Coronal mass ejection can get us, and our field strength of our magnetic field, which is our shield, is dropping, which makes us more susceptible to even weaker solar storms. Another thing that can get us, that you and I have talked about quite a bit, is electromagnetic pulse from a high altitude nuclear explosion. If we're in a war with another country, that's the preferred technique, and it's in their military doctrines to take us down. Now, whether or not that happens, there is direct kinetic ballistic attacks upon the power stations. Not power stations, substations. You know, there are 9 critical substations in this country. If you take them down, we'll take down everything else. 9. And they have the Revolutionary Guard there in Iran. When confronted with that proposition, his response was, I already got groups in the United States targeting 20 of them. You know, they have, you know, these sleeper cells here in this country, according to him. And he said they'd already targeted 20. So is that true? I mean, we're on perhaps the verge of a conflict with Iran right now, perhaps.
We absolutely are. So Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, any other nuclear country. So every country's first line of attack right now is a combined arms attack on an electric grid. It's ours too. So the military war doctrine, the next war.
So explain combined arms. I've talked about it, but tell everybody what combined arms is.
Okay, so combined arms is they hit us with a cyber attack, and then they hit us with an EMP attack. They hit your grid in multiple ways, right?
And the guys come in and
physical attack. They have sleeper cells in here. They physically attack the locations. So research the Metcalf Power Substation here about 8 years ago. It was attacked in California. You know what? I'm not going to get on that rabbit trail. There have been physical attacks in the past. We've never caught the people. They were dry runs. You can read the after action reports of how they set it up. They cut the fiber optic cables and the phone lines so they couldn't call 911. They shot up the transformers with AK-47s. They did it from pre-planned locations where they had triangle-shaped piles of rocks, which is what they use for firing positions in the Middle East. This was a dry run. They never caught them. They have no clue who did this. And if they did that to 9 substations in the continental United States at the same time, they could take down the entire power grid. Okay, that's a physical attack. You were talking about cyber attack. They are in our grid. If you haven't, you've got to be sleeping on a rock if you don't understand the fact that Russia is in our electric grid. They're in our pipelines. They are all throughout our system. Guess what? We're in their systems too. So let's not get it twisted that we're not doing the same things to them. Okay, but everybody's in everybody else's systems. You can go right now on CNN and type in Admiral Rogers. 4 years ago in my book, Survival Theory, 4 years ago, I provide a link in there. He's in front of Congress and they're saying, well, we're hearing about this, you know, the threat of cyber attack taking down our electric grid. He said, it's the single thing that keeps me up at night. He goes, I believe we're probably going to get hit. They're fighting them off all the time. I believe they're going to try it before, you know, the end of my term. His term ended 2 years ago. Okay. You have people like Roscoe Bartlett, congressman from West Virginia, senator from West Virginia, retires at 92, grows a beard longer than Allison's, Greg's, it goes to West Virginia, lives off grid on a farm right now. And he was one of the key guys meeting with the Russians on the EMP threat. Right. So because I've met these guys, I've been there. The people that are in the know are making preparations for this. The fact that we haven't been hit already, and you're talking about Iran ramping up, North Korea's ramping up. You got China threatening us over Taiwan. Putin. So I just released a video the other day about one of Putin's military advisors on some Russian interview was talking about how Ukraine, right in the interview, and it's in Russian, you can read the subtitles down below, straight up saying that the Russians are fully anticipating going into Ukraine, U.S. isn't going to want to get involved unilaterally with troops and soldiers and start World War III. So they fully anticipate that we're going to black out one of their cities. They're going to black out one of our cities, and then we're going to black each other's countries out. They said it right on the news. Okay. There is so much information. If you haven't been to Michael Mabee's website, everybody needs to go, Mabee, michaelmabee.org. He's the tip of the spear. He's getting FOIA requests from all the inside stuff that's happening at the electric utilities. It's dirty dog stuff. NERC and FERC and how the electric utility industry is run. Everyone's like, oh, it's not going to happen because the government's overseeing stuff. The government's looking over what's happening, and they're saying, hey, you should probably do this, this, and this. And NERC, which is North American
Electrical Reliability
Corporation, is their oversight board for the electric utility industry. So they basically write their own security standards. They enforce their own security standards. It's on the you have to turn yourself in. So if you're in the electric utility industry, if you're a electric supplier and you break one of the critical infrastructure standards, you have to turn yourself in. Turn yourself in to your own industry. Your own industry writes the fine, which you pay into your own industry lobbyists. It goes into your own coffers, and then you turn around and you take that fine and you put it back into the electric payers. It's a big self-licking ice cream cone, to quote General Krosniak again, right? It's insanity. And they're writing fake science. The EPRI report that came out here a while back, where they went and they tested a high voltage transformer, but they only did it.
Hey, listen, the people that are writing the science aren't even scientists.
No.
They're not scientists, they're
No.
not engineers. They have people with business degrees and just all kind of lackluster degrees, supposedly writing scientific reports and putting opinion out, and that crap gets published in the magazines and newspapers and makes it on TV. We've got real scientists in our EMP groups, the ones that you and I are members of. Real scientists, real physicists, real engineers, and I'm an electrical engineer myself. So, and actually we're system safety and electrical engineering right now. I do avionics system safety on space launch system, but
part of the problem that's happening, and General Cross brought this up after the last EDTF, and that was one of the major points that they were trying to fix, is the fact that the EMP test data, the true EMP test data, is highly classified, TS2 level classified, means that I wasn't even allowed to go into when we were there. Why? You can go get the same data from open source Russian universities that have testing. You can get this information overseas, but in the US, it's so highly classified, the true ramifications of what an EMP would do in this country. So the EPRI, what they did is the EMP Commission heard EPRI, which is Edison Policy Research Institute. It's the utility conglomerate lobbyist science wing or whatever. EPRI's writing this report. EMP Commission said, hey, why don't you guys, send one or your scientists, which I don't think they had, over. We'll get them the security clearance they need so they can come in and see the truth of the EMP threat, the stuff that you can't normally get at. They wouldn't even respond. They wouldn't do that. They didn't want to look behind the curtain. So they went and they tested a high voltage transformer up to 8 kilovolts per meter. When an EMP is 50, with the super EMP is up to 200 at this point. So they come back and they're, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. The electric grid's secure, and it's just, it's bad. And so the thing is, there's lots of stuff that's, I have a Patreon page where people follow me, and I put out regular current events, things that are happening in the news, behind the scenes, smaller sources that aren't making it to the front pages that you're probably not seeing. Every single week, there's a grid-related story, multiple grid-related stories, things that are happening behind the scenes that the American people have no clue. They just think that every day when they walk in their house, they're going to flip that light switch and that light's going to come on. They're going to open that faucet and clean water is going to come out. And it's just not going to be the case. This is something, I'm not a prophet. I am not predicting the future, but every aspect of human life revolves around electricity right now. That's the easiest target for any of our enemies. The fact that they haven't hit us there already is crazy to me. And it's something that's probably coming in our lifetime. So That's where the future words. General Quast has a great talk to Hillsdale College. If you've never seen it, go check it out. The next war is going to be fought in the electromagnetic spectrum. It's not going to be fought with tanks and aircraft carriers and missiles and rockets. It's going to be fought in the electronic sphere, cyber attacks, EMP. That's where the next war is going to happen.
Well, all those weapon systems you mentioned are totally reliant on GPS and just all kinds of electronic media, because we use data fusion in the battlefield. Our command and control systems are highly integrated. We have future combat systems that the soldiers carry around. We've got where a soldier and Army is communicating with an asset in the Navy. It's unheard of. I mean, it's great if everything works, but when the enemy jams it and brings it down, like, hey, we just had 6 ships in the Gulf of Oman yesterday that lost power and steering. 6 ships. Somebody took them out electronically, and then they hijacked, Panamanian oil tanker, called the Princess Asphalt.
Yep.
So, under that cover, they used that cover to hijack an oil tanker.
You're talking about communications. That was one of the things that blew my mind at the EDTF. So when we're sitting there, I discovered that there is, so I mentioned there's no plan of action. So they talk about black start. There's actually no plan there. That's just something that they're talking about, creating a plan to restart the the power plant at some point. But the military has no plan of action. Okay. One of the things that blew my mind, it's not just their electricity is wholly reliant on civilian electric grid, so is their communications, which means that whenever the EMP grid down event, whatever the case may be, happens, where solar flare, cyber attack, whatever shuts down the grid, that base commander at Maxwell Air Force Base or Fairchild or wherever they're at can't just pick up the phone and call the Pentagon and call HQ and say, hey, what's going on? Our lights are out. What's happening? What's the plan? When are we getting resupplied? There's no communications. Okay. The military, so outside of NORAD and our nuclear missile triad, that's different. But the average, 99% of the military, there's no communications, there's no phones, there's no plan of action. They're going to be sitting there twiddling their thumbs just like everybody else, except they've got all the guns and the trucks and stuff, right? So what you've got happening here is they're talking about possibly throwing up these like mini sat phone satellites, low orbit stuff right after the EMP, but they're not even sure if they're going to work because the ionosphere gets charged with particles for like 2 weeks. And, and any enemy that hits us with an EMP, they're probably going to hit us with another one 2 weeks later to make sure they nail everything, anything we had at backup, that we pulled out, started using. So it is a serious, people, because they're uneducated on this threat. Again, Greg, I know you had Dr. Peter Pry on. I've had him on. Read his book, The Power and Light. It's a tell-all book for the last 20 years of all the things that he's been a part of with the EMP Commission and how they've just been thwarted at every turn. We've got deep state people, and I'm not using that conspiratorially at all. I'm saying there are people in the DOD, in the DOE, in these big organizations that are making the calls that don't understand the threat. They're not fixing it. Russia's grid is hardened. China's hardening their grid. North Korea doesn't have to. They don't really have a grid. But we're the only ones not taking it serious. We're the only ones that aren't hardening our grid. And every year that goes by, our life revolves more and more around that electricity flowing. So that is the prime target. I mean, who would have thought we'd have terrorists flying planes into skyscrapers, 10 years or 20 years ago? This is something that's not on the forefront of a lot of people's mind, but guess what? Our enemy, read the EMP Commission report in 2017, Combined Arms Warfare, and I think the other one was Foreign Views on electromagnetic or grid down attacks or something like that. Read that. Look at what our enemies are saying about this. Look at how they're planning first strikes on this topic. And last thing. So this doesn't, people are like, they have this concept in their head where it's going to be an intercontinental ballistic missile coming from Russia. And it's, they're not going to do that because then we'll fire our missiles and they'll, start World War III. No, that's not how it's going to happen. Look up the KClub missile launcher, which is a Jafar group out of, anyways, they're going to drive.
Go ahead, talk about that, because I'm really expecting we're going to get something out of the Gulf of Mexico or the.
That's right. They'll
EMC.
drive right into the Gulf of Mexico. KClub missile launcher is a large shipping container that looks like a shipping container. You can go on YouTube and watch advertisements for Russia, which sells these things, and you can put missiles in them, and you can send them into an enemy country. They advertise it for small countries to defend themselves against big countries around them, and they're like, "Hey, just take our KClub missile launchers, put in missiles in these things, just drive them in trucks all throughout your enemy country." And they can be parked in a farmer's field behind a barn somewhere for 25 years, battery powered. All you have to do is press a button, make a phone call from your country, and that thing opens up like a transformer. And you can hit all kinds of strategic locations. You can launch an EMP weapon. And here's the thing: you don't need a missile. You can take a weather balloon that you can buy on Amazon, put a turkey timer on a suitcase bomb, and send it up into the atmosphere. It's not complicated. We have seen that terrorists have plans for this. It's just a matter of time till somebody actually, pulls the trigger on this thing. No pun intended.
Oh, by the way, we talked about Dr. Pry a minute ago. I'm actually going to have him on this channel tomorrow.
Everybody needs to tune into that. Dr. Peter Pry is, I love that man. In our industry, he gets a lot of flack. That's because he speaks truth to power. He ain't afraid to say what needs to be said, and you need to listen to what he's saying, because most of the people in the EMP kind of industry, me and Pry are outliers because we tell it like it is. We don't pull punches. Most of the people in the industry don't scare people. Just keep it calm, keep everybody calm, and we'll get the legislators to act. They ain't gonna act. They're owned by the utility companies at this point. If you don't know it, the electric utility industry spends more money lobbying than gas, the big oil. Okay, they've spent over $1 billion in the last 10 years not to get regulated. So
that's what we are up against with our communities, our organizations that are struggling to try to get this grid hardened. We are trying to get the grid hardened so we don't have to worry about these things. And, as I've mentioned so many times, I've chaired 2 power grid defense conferences, and I'm involved in these national committees such as you are. And that's how I met Jonathan the Hollerman, everyone, is through the Secure the Grid Telecon. And he so eloquently laid it out there, what to expect if the grid went down. I thought, man, I got to have him here on our channel tonight, because he has grid down consultant as his company, guys. He talks to people about things to do to take care of us. And we mentioned several things that could bring our grid down, and there's more. There's just a multitude. An earthquake in the Madrid fault, New Madrid fault could rip all these lines. And he mentioned, it'd take 18 months to get it, things fixed, 12 to 18 months, guys. That's to get 12 transformers installed on your loading dock. On your loading dock, you still got to install it, but by then most of the population of the country is gone. Who's going to do it, and how are you going to requisition these things when all the requisitioning is through the grid, through the electronics, through the internet, and you need fuel and power to deliver all this stuff, and you're not going to have any fuel, you're not going to have any power. So
where are you going to find a lineman? Everybody's dispersed to the 4 winds. It's not like you pick up a phone and call First Energy and say, hey, send us some guys to hook this thing up. Who knows where anybody's at? You just lost 80 to 90% of the population. Who you fixing the grid for?
More than that. I think in the end, 1 out of 300 maybe all that stuff standing.
Yeah. So it's going to get ugly. And again, it's one of those things where, and so here's the thing. So, I'm being really hard on the military and the government and stuff, but to be honest, this is beyond design basis. This is something that is so catastrophically hard to wrap your brain around, the idea of losing the electric grid. Most of the people that are supposed to be putting the plans together for this, they don't even know where to start. They don't even understand the threat to begin with. So the fact that you can't feed 350 million, my recommendation was, well, I'm not going to put that out there, but I was asked to write some recommendations to the EDTF. You can't save the cities. You're going to have a governor trying to send 5,000 National Guardsmen down into Austin, Texas, to secure the chaos that's happening on day 3 or day 4. They might be able to do so. Maybe they can and restore order. But guess what? What happens a week later when people are really going nuts, right? At some point, those 5,000 troops are surrounded by 2,000 people. Those 5,000 troops are probably getting MREs where the 2 million people around them aren't, right? What happens when the good old boys with the guns, and I'm one of them, show up asking that military troop, hey, I got a sick kid at home. Let me have one of those MREs. You know what I mean? That's going to go south in a hurry. My recommendation was to keep any troops out of major metropolitan areas, pull back, and it's something that they're never going to do. But you got to let the cities; they're going to burn. And I don't mean that. I'm not trying to be disparaging, but you've got millions of people packed into little land areas with no food, no water, no sewage, no nothing, no heat, no AC.
Let's paint on this. Hang on it. So you're in the city. You have no water. That's how you put fires out. Remember San Francisco after the earthquakes?
That's right.
When the earthquake that really messed San Francisco, it was the fires. And now if you have an EMP or a CME, you got all this wiring in your house. This wiring is liable to set on fire. And if you're in a city with all the buildings so close packed, the fire catches from building to building to building. And if that don't occur, the people are in their homes trying to make campfires and having lights and cooking. They're building fires inside their house. They don't know how to do it. And you're in a big apartment complex. Guess what? Fires. So it's going to be like San Francisco. Cities are going to, you're exactly right. They're going to burn.
So I'm looking at a couple of the comments here, and someone was just saying that, they were just talking about, hunkering down. So if you are in a big city, that's a common thing that I see from people. Your house is your safety. Just try and ride it out as long as you can in your house. The problem is the last place you want to be on week 2, week 3 is on the open road. If you're in a city, you need to get out within the first 72 hours. If you're not out within the first 72 hours, good luck. Because at that point, the first, everyone talks about everything falling apart, and it will. So the first day or two with no lights and no TV and, no police scanners working and the cars may or may not be working. Yeah, people are going to be stealing, TVs and radios and shoes and whatnot. But it's not going to be like, they're not going to like shoot you for walking down the street with a backpack on, right? So this idea of things will fall apart very quickly. This grocery stores will get looted. People will be panicking. But the whole, kill the guy walking down the street isn't going to happen for, a good 3 days in the cities and probably a week or 2 in the country. So if you can get out of the city early, that's your best chance of survival. And that doesn't. So the other thing I'm not advocating is I am not advocating this whole open road policy where you just wander around. You have to have a location to go to. That's a longer subject. We're out of time here. I don't want to go too long, but that's a longer subject. Bugging out does not mean bugging out wandering around the open road. Like what was the movie, The Road? That's insanity. That's almost as bad as lone wolfing it, right? Probably worse because that's about just as bad. You got to have a location to go to, an uncle's farm or, some bed and breakfast that you stayed at that's tucked away somewhere that where, they're growing vegetables. I put 5 or 6 strategies forward for people that are on a budget that can't afford a multi-million-dollar retreat, like, my clients, the stuff I build, but it's going to be difficult. So the answer is not, so the comment that I was thinking of that I keep seeing is like, oh, you don't need electricity to survive. You get back to the basics. That's fine. That's you. But we got 315 people watching now. You've got 50,000 subscribers. You're in the like 0.0005% if you're here listening to Greg and me talk right now. So your mind's already somewhat there. That's not who I'm worried about with electricity. I'm worried about the other 320 million Americans that are going to be coming for your back to basics, right? So you got to be thinking about that. You got to stop overlooking all the threats around you so you can have all the life skills in the world. You can stock up on 10 years worth of freeze-dried food and Fort Berkeley water. You can have all the best stuff in the world. But if you're in the middle of the city or if you're in a bad location, you're just going to be feeding the warlord or the group that comes and takes your stuff. So I know I'm a big ray of sunshine, Greg, huh?
Well, you got to start with realism before you start with a fixism. So we got to
bingo. Can I steal that?
On the right track. You got to wake them up first.
That's right.
That's what we're doing. We're waking them up to just how deep and bad this is, so they'll take it seriously. I tell everybody to keep their eyes wide open and head on the swivel. I'm gonna call my followers swivel heads, and I know they're getting pretty good with that. But we just got to wake them up to just how bad it can be, so they'll take serious what they need to do to get through this. And I think the people that are in this room already listening to this are way ahead of most people because they already have some awareness of it, and a lot of them have gotten started on it. So we just got to kind of dial them in. And a lot of people have asked me, and so I live in Las Vegas here. What should I do? And I said, get out of the city. That's what the first thing I tell all of them. They don't like to hear that, but it's the truth. And like you said, 72 hours. I think I can get across country in 72 hours if I need to get from Arizona spot. But that means I got to jump and go. I'm not in a city. I'm in a rural area here, but it's kind of a little suburb out in the middle of 14 miles out of Huntsville. But there's still too many people here.
Yep.
Too many people.
You can, if you have a EMP proof bug out there, or if you have a good 4-wheel drive vehicle, and if you're driving, just stay off the main roads. Don't go through towns. Have some paper maps. You can put some pretty good miles in, getting out of town. So.
All right. So let's talk about solutions. What do you, besides getting out of town, I did a couple of videos on bug out locations. There's a whole lot more we could do on that, and like you said, that'd be a whole nother video. But what, just for first order, top level, what should people do in your estimate?
Okay,
what people need to do to get ready?
Sure. First step is information before you buy, information before you act. Educate yourself before you make any big decisions on what you're doing. So I talked about how I've helped over 500 families. I've done on-site boots on the ground analysis of some crazy awesome survival retreats all around the world. I've built over a dozen myself. The big problems I see is location, is finding that good location, but that's another topic. Another big, the number 2 problem I see is probably food, because everybody builds a survival retreat for 4 people in their immediate family, and they stock up on a 1-year food plan, which only has probably 40% of the calories their family actually needs. That's a different, I'll dig down on that here in a second. And then when they go out of town, they grab their mom and dad, and then their sister, and they don't want their sister and her 3 little kids to starve. So they end up showing up their survival retreat with twice as many people as they thought they were going to have there. And then they've got half as much food that they thought they had for their own family, which means they only got about 2 months worth of food. Now they never make it through the first winter. That's a big topic I see. So the company that you showed there for your freeze-dried food, in my opinion, it's one of the best companies in the sense that they have 2,000 calories a day in there. If you go 90% of the other long-term food companies, and I'm not going to name any of them because I don't want to get sued, most long-term food plans, if they hide how many calories are in their food plans, and you got to do some serious digging to find it, on average, it's 800 to 900 calories per day. And to read the Minnesota Starvation Experience, see what living off 1,500 calories a day will look like.
That's half what they had. So
that's right. That's exactly right. So you can take all their symptoms that they had and basically double it. But with that said, so if you're going to buy any kind, before you buy food, again, knowledge is first. Go to a basal metabolic calculator online, punch in your height, weight, sex, age for each person in your family, for each person in your group. Find out their base level and then multiply that times 1.5 Harris-Benedict rule. Find out, my point is find out how many calories your body needs for a year. Yes, you could trim that back a little bit because we all need to lose a few pounds, right, Greg? But the point is this is going to be a stressful environment. You're going to be working, you're going to be gardening, you're going to be hoeing, you're going to be doing things that you're not used to in your office job. You're going to probably burn more calories than you think you will, but by all means, find out how many calories you need. Don't just buy a 1-year food plan thinking it's 1 year. It might be. Maybe you're, 5'4", $140, then 2,000 calories a day is probably going to do you. I'm 6'4", 240. So, when you buy long-term food, make sure you're buying it based on the caloric value and not just serving sizes. So that's real important when buying long-term food. So those are some basic things. So again, go back, research the books that I was showing you, educate yourself on what starvation looks like, because everybody thinks they have an idea of what a grid down event is going to look like, and they're underestimating it by 1,000-fold. They have no clue what's coming when this does come.
Yeah, and once again, just because a lot of people weren't in the chat room when we started, for those that are in now, I'll show again, I've got this deal. If you go to prepwithgreg.com, you can get this food that lasts 25 years. This is what he's talking about here. It's got 2,000 calories per day. And it may or may not be enough for you. You've got to figure that out yourself. But 2,000 calories per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a combination that is hard to beat. You know what you're getting, and it's easy to carry, easy to store because it's freeze dried, lightweight, good storage, and you can take it out of here and put it in your backpacks. If you're thugging out with a backpack, that's easy to carry stuff, guys. It's hard to beat. But it's prepwithgreg.com if you want to do with that. So yeah, I really like my Patriot Supply.
On the food subject, Greg, on the food subject, if you're buying long-term food and you live in the city and your bug out location is your Uncle Bob's farm somewhere outside of the city, don't put your food at your house. Store your food at your uncle's house. Amen. Because here's another thing. A lot of people, they're going to have all their guns and they're not going to have all their stuff's going to be in their house. And then you ain't going to walk away from it, and you can't carry it all, and you can't, so if you're going to buy long-term food storage, make sure it's at the location you intend to be. Don't keep it in your house thinking that, well, I'll ride it out here as long as I can. And then if it gets real bad, it's going to get bad. It's going to get way worse than you think. And at that point, when it's way worse and you're finally on your last leg, they've eaten your dog, out of your backyard. You're like, we got to get out of here. That's the last minute you want to be on the open road.
They ate your security dog, that big German Shepherd and Doberman. That was somebody's breakfast.
That's right.
And it will be too. So
probably yours if you're hungry enough.
It may be.
I'm sorry. All you dog lovers out there. That was a poor joke. Love ya.
Poor joke, but reality when people are starving sometimes is not a pretty picture.
It isn't, and that is honestly, that is the reality of the fact. If you read these books and you see what these people do to survive, they eat the dead, and it's not a pretty picture. These are books that they don't teach in history. They don't assign in history class anymore. The atrocities that happen all over the world, everywhere, every type of person, every color of person. It knows no bounds by racial, demographic. If you take people's food away and you put them in starvation scenarios, it's just survival, and they will do whatever it takes to get food. So you must understand that before you make plans to run out in the woods and live off the land, or try and put steel shutters on your house in downtown Houston somewhere. That's not going to get you far at all in this scenario. If it's a tornado, if it's a 3-day event or something, yeah, you're fine. Yeah. But in a nationwide extended grid down event, you got to get out of the cities, people. No ifs, ands, or buts.
The roads will be blockaded by warlords eventually. Warlords will rule the roads. That, and the roads of old, like the Natchez Trace and all those roads of old, they had highway, what's called highway robbermen. And it was the same way in Europe. You had people that would lurk out for people traveling these roads, and they would rob them on the road. And you're going to see that again. That will be returned. You'll see that all over again. And it will not be a pretty thing. So if you're carrying all your preps with you on your trip, well, you just may not make it there with them. Somebody else might liberate you of all that stuff you worked so hard. So yeah, pre-position as much as you can and wherever you plan to go. And make sure you trust Uncle Bob.
Yeah, that's right. He's gonna eat all your food before you get there.
Decide not to let you in.
make sure he doesn't eat all your food before you get there.
You might want to make sure Uncle Bob is well stocked too.
Yeah, that's right.
So take care of Uncle Bob if you don't want to get a rob.
There you go.
Well, I kind of like the poetic side of things, guys. So the thing is, these disasters are survivable if you prepare, if you think ahead, if you work it. Mm-hmm. You always have slim chances maybe, but there are survivable. There will be survivors, and you can be among them. And some people get a lot of despair thinking about these things. people in Europe didn't want to go through World War II. They didn't want to see their homeland blasted to smithereens. But guess what? They were able eventually to stand up and rebuild a society there and rebuild their nations. And then, if you go to Europe, it looks pretty good. In fact, didn't take too long to get things rebuilt. So, if you survive, it may, I don't think we're going to get the power grid back for generations, to be honest, but we can still build a thriving society that we can live in on the other side if we, put our heads together and do it right. Now, one of the things I also do is I promoted this idea of forming tribe groups around the country. And I've got a couple of my tribe leads in the chat room here, one in Maine and one in Arkansas. And, I represent, Arizona and Alabama for that regard also. And the whole idea is you can't do it as a lone wolf, so we got to band together. So we're forming up the leadership of tribe groups. I've got a list of people we're going to start filtering through. But it is my experience that most of the people that apply to that kind of thing, you probably don't want. A lot of people are just looking to freeload. So we got to be real careful who we got to screen people real carefully that we bring in. But I know a lot of people really are looking for somewhere to go and to survive through these things. Yeah. So it's going to take some time to build this stuff up. And, I'm a busy guy. And I hunt volunteers to help me out from time to time, work with that. And I do have some. But we're all really busy people. We're working it. We're developing it. So a lot of people ask me, what do you expect the timeline? When's all this stuff going to happen? And I got a crystal ball here, but the best thing it's good for is shining light through my Santa blue bottle given to me by Blue Bottle Bunny Farm.
So timeline, if you just looked at the EMP threat, it's easy to dismiss, right? Because it takes a nuclear weapon up, launch 300 kilometers above the country. We'll dismiss that, even though I could give you enough, over the course of time, I could probably convince most people that it's a highly likely thing in our lifetime that's going to happen. But so if you look at each of the threats individually, it's easy to dismiss them. The solar flare, we're 150 years past due a massive solar flare happens usually around every 100 years. We're at 150 years. So we're 50 years past due for a massive CME solar flare.
That's a Carrington event. A railroad event could take our grid down. Maybe today, even a Quebec hydro event could do it.
Possibly, yeah. Depending on where
we hang everything on these Carrington events, but there could be a weaker one do it. And the sun has occasionally, it looks like, thrown out storms far bigger than the Carrington event, like maybe a 1710 AD, the Charlemagne event. So, guys, the sun and the sun is known to throw out the worst events when it's in a minimum. So for some reason, when it's at a minimum, when you're thinking that, hey, we got less storms overall, that don't mean that. What that actually means is the storms you get can be a lot uglier. So we don't even want that, or just a whole lot of rapid shots in a big solar maximum either could be a problem. So we've got a lot of things to consider here. So the sun, they figure 14% per decade chance of a Carrington event. So what is it, for these other events is our magnetic field of Earth drops and we get more susceptible.
Yep. And EMP, solar flare, the cyber threat is growing by leaps and bounds. Every one of those countries are in our systems. At any given point right now, they could flip the switch on us. It's just a fact of life. And the reason they don't, mutually assured destruction, we're going to flip the switch on them, right? So, but how long is that going to work for? So how bad are things going to get before somebody actually does flip that switch at some point? And then the physical attack, research a Metcalf substation attack. Look at the fact that even with a sleeper cell in the country, you hit 9 substations at the same time with hand weapons. You can take them down. You can take down the electric grid in the country. So,
yeah, look at this report. There's a report generated talking about the terrorist attacks, and there's a threat real and serious. And they go through a big list of them. You know what? They don't even have the Metcalf event in here. That kind of blows my mind. But what they're showing here, this is an interesting curve. I find this data really interesting.
Well, they didn't list it as a terrorist attack because they didn't figure out who did it, but we know it was.
Oh, okay. That's why it's not listed. I see. Well, there you go. So you can see this is on an increase, maybe a little bit of a decrease in 17 and 18, but this is a growing threat. And this is not cyber, this is direct ballistic attacks. So, and there's a lot of things about groups, and so they're not even looking at nations.
You could just go through the news. I don't know if this is global or if this is just US based, but look how many Ukraine, they've taken down Ukraine's electric grid. Mabee, they took down Mabee. China, all these countries are they're taking gangs. Anytime things start ratcheting up, they take down their capital city's electric grid. It's been happening for the last 2 years. It's probably happened half a dozen, 8 or 9 cities now have been blacked out by an enemy nation. So if you think this is just sci-fi, this isn't coming, this is the future of warfare. And black out a city and shut down that city for 2 or 3 days, and that country is going to be like, okay, so yeah. We're talking about a lot of deep stuff. We're talking about a lot of dark stuff. But at the end of the day, people always ask me, how can you live life? I'm a happy guy every day. I've got 2 young kids. I've been married for 21 years. I go home, I sleep like a baby every night. I don't stress this stuff. And the reason is because, I put my faith in, I don't put my faith in myself, and I don't put my faith in my preparation. I put my faith in Jesus Christ. So anybody out there that's listening, I would recommend get in the Word. If you're taking a Bible bag, make sure you have a Bible in that thing. And the things are going to get dark, things are going to get terrible. But if you put your hope in Jesus Christ, then you got a better place to go when it's all said and done.
Well, I've got one follower who's comes to all my chats. He's really concerned about all this stuff. His name's Andrew. He's a real young man. He's scared to death of what's coming. Now he don't put his faith in the Lord. So, what can we say to Andrew to how to have some assurance that, I tell him, says, look, man, we got to prep. But, he's not very far along the prepping world. Yeah. So I tell him one step at a time. But, some of these people are going, well, what is there to live for on the other side? And I've kind of talked about Europe, that's why I brought that up, is that you can still have something on the other side. I don't know how many's going to be left standing on the other side, but, people that are listening to us have a far better chance than a lot of other people out there in society. So, some of us can make it. And I think we can actually build a better world on the other side than what we're in today, because we're going to have a lot of wisdom after we've gone through this mess, a lot of wisdom that's not in the possession of people today.
I hope so, Greg. My big fear is, you lose 90% of the population. The other 10% aren't going to be a lot of the people you want to hang around with. You know what I mean? They're going to be the baddest dudes that check their conscience at the door and done terrible things to live through it. So there's going to be a lot of hurting people on the backside of this. There's going to be a lot of evil people. And there's a lot of ways that good groups, good preparedness groups, good survival groups that have people's best intentions or, can help in that scenario. It's going to be a big world that we can help. We're going to have
to rebuild law and order. So yep. And then people, I've said those groups will reign and they will create terror for some time, but at some point, the remaining population is going to get really ticked off and they will exterminate them.
Yeah.
I believe those groups will be exterminated, and all their members, they will cease to exist. They may rain havoc, but at some point, the population will say enough, and they will cease to exist. That is as long as we're allowed to have the right to bear bang bangs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother video.
can't say that directly or I might get shut down.
Right. Code words, Greg. Use code words. You get demonetized.
Yeah. They won't like that kind of stuff. So that might be a good reason. Hey, my live sessions get demonetized a lot. I did get a super chat in here and I appreciate that. So if anybody can chime in, that definitely helps. So yeah, we got hits the fan, gave me a super chat. So yeah, I've got a couple good super chats in here, and had somebody else earlier. So I appreciate that, guys. That really does help these live sessions in here. But we do have some hope. I mean, Jonathan and I are both involved in the communities to try to get the grid hardened so this don't happen in the first place. Oh, by the way, there is an infrastructure bill out there right now that does talk a little bit about grid hardening. So it might be worth promoting that. Another thing we can do is follow the lessons of Ambassador Hank Cooper. I've had him on my channel, and I probably will bring him back. He talked about the fact that he socialized the idea of how bad it would be through the emergency management community in the Carolinas by talking them into doing a real protracted grid down situation. Hey, practice that, it's nationwide. You got nobody coming to help you. You got to deal with it, and it's going to last for a year. What are you going to do? They freaked out. And the result of what he started there got the Duke Power to decide to start hardening their grid, which covers North and South Carolina. So he's been the most effective person out there in this arena trying to get this done. So you got to, have a lot of appreciation for Hank. It was kind of amazing. I don't know why that video underperformed. It's kind of crazy that I didn't get more views on that video than I did, because that was some of the best advice out there. And you don't hear that on these other prepping channels. There's so many prepping channels out there. The guys don't really have a lot of expertise in this area, and they get 100 times more views than we get here telling the truth.
Yep.
And what to do about it, not just the fear. We are proactive in trying to fix this situation. And Mike Mabee, I've had him on my channel a couple of times. I think the world of Mike. He's a great guy.
Absolutely.
Conference here in Huntsville, and we had a lot of good conversations sitting around the table talking. He is a true hero. Wiseout, thank you. $20 super chat from Wiseout. He is an awesome individual. He was actually in the Twin Towers when they fell, and he carried a guy out, and he credited that guy with saving his life, because he said he'd be in the tower if he hadn't carried that guy out. So that's the kind of character he is. He'll save somebody's life and give them credit for saving his life. But he is such an awesome Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabee. He's a good guy to hang around. He's a good guy to have as a friend, and to have on your team when you're trying to get something done, like get the good.
I call him the tip of the spear. He's been, man, I tell you what, I don't know. I keep telling him he needs to hire security and watch his back, because if you've never been to Michael Mabee's website and looked through all the information he's gotten through FOIA requests from the electric utilities and all the dirty air he's put out, the only reason, because nobody's aware of his, he's just a small guy. He's literally, I just can't understand how that information is not getting hit with mainstream news. Some of the crazy things that he's putting the information out there through FOIA requests, the stuff he's finding out about the electric utility industry, and nobody just seems to care. It's sad, but yep. But so Michael Mabee's actually, he's my next guy I'm having on my page. So Dr. Peter Pry, Michael Mabee, you guys got to follow them, check them out. And I have a YouTube channel. I don't put out a lot of content. I was looking at doing like a real heavy YouTube channel a while ago. And I know, Greg, it's a full-time, it is a lot of work. And with Grid Down Consulting, I didn't have the time to do it justice. And I was just very frustrated, because the seemed like the guys with the biggest platforms on YouTube are some of the most clueless guys. Not all of them, and I'm not going to name names, but I mean, they don't get it. It's so Hollywood, Walking Dead, prepper, It's just so like, I get very frustrated. So one guy I was talking to, he had, I'm not going to say what he did, because I don't want to dime him out, but he had one of the biggest websites of bug out bags and like gear and survival supplies, and he has a really big website selling stuff like that. So we've been talking for a while. He made a knife recommendation, K-Bar BK2, that big one, right? The big pig sticker. It's I think it's 18 ounces, just a knife. I own one.
I got 2 K-bars, a big one and a little one.
What's that?
I got 2 K-bars myself.
Yeah. So, but he was saying it's the ultimate, survival knife, because you can, he was like chopping a sapling down with it. I'm like, you're using the wrong tool for the job there.
Hey man, I wouldn't do it.
And he's doing all these things with this knife. I'm like, well, you should be using a hand saw for that. You should be, you know what I mean? Like a silky saw and a smaller, smaller knife would get you a lot further down the road than that big 18 or 20 ounce knife or whatever. But anyways, so it's a good knife. It's fine. If you have a K-Bar BK2, don't beat me up in the comments here. But
I use a bowling knife for chopping and shoveling too. And thank you to DJ Ronnie G for the super chat. Appreciate that. So,
and so but I asked him, I said, well, why did you recommend that? You're doing all this stuff. And he was like, honestly, he's like, I've never even been camping. So, the guy had never even been backpacking or camping. That's one of the biggest channels. I can send you to some information right now where one of the biggest, there's this writer that ghost writes for a lot of these prepper, these prepper forums or these prepper websites and stuff like this, and they write articles and they do stuff under pen names and stuff. And the guy's clowning on us. He's saying, oh, he's a far left, kind of. Anyways, but he's clowning on it, and he's one of the top writers. And so you have to understand. So it kind of goes back to educate yourself on the threat and know who you're getting your information from. Take a look at their background. They're a prepper expert. Why? Like, what is their qualifications? What gives them a right to tell you where to go or what to do, or, what have they done in their background? Because a lot of these guys, if you look at their bio, it's like, well, I grew up hunting and fishing with my dad in, Vermont. So, and I've got 400,000 followers. It's just kind of like, well, I'm sorry. I'm being a negative Nelly here, Greg. Let's close on a happy note, brother.
Hey, by the way, one channel tells people that the EMP will not happen, or CME won't affect you on the night side. And go, really? Did you look at the Hydro-Quebec event? And then a CME comes in for the magnetic field of the Earth. So it can hit anywhere on Earth, Quebec Hydro happened at 2:44 in the morning, and it was dark, the side of the planet facing away from the sun. The grid went down in Quebec, so, and it took out a lot of the Northeast. So a lot of these people don't even know what they're talking about, but that video got tons of views, way more than any video I've ever put out. Yeah. And nobody challenged it. It's like, really? Whoa. So
that's why I don't have a YouTube channel. I don't have the time or the patience to try and counteract these guys that got in the game early, that have the professional cameras, that have the cool intros, So, I mean, basically anybody with some marketing skills can come out and write a book or start a YouTube channel or start a website and make a lot of money because they're really good at marketing and they've got a cool personality and they don't say a lot when they talk like I do. And, so they get these huge followings and they're wearing clown shoes. They have no clue what they're talking about. So
I got crappy cameras. I got my computer won't even take a decent microphone. But I try to put out good information.
I'm on a Chinese webcam right now. I'm pretty sure they're probably recording this in China somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's Zoom. They're getting everything. But I've been on here telling them on Zoom that Xi Jinping's failed and he's Hitler 2.0. So I'm sure somebody over there's got me on a watch list. And if they ever take over America, they'll probably come look me up. So
they got to find you first, Greg.
Got to find me first. And if they do, good luck to them. I might need some entertainment about that time anyway. So, it might make life interesting. All right. Well, there is hope for the future, guys. And that's why Jonathan and I are involved in these power grid communities. And we'll put more information out here soon about things you can do. I'll have to have Mike maybe back on for too long. But tomorrow is Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, and he is the dean of this topic. He is such an excellent speaker. He's got great background. He knows the EMP science. He's been a weapons systems expert, and he's actually a historian also. So he brings a lot of perspective when he talks. He's got a lot of background. So that will be an excellent talk. So stay tuned tomorrow for Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. Jonathan, I've enjoyed having you on here. Everybody loves you from the channel. I got a lot of great comments saying that you're a great interview. You're a great guest. Maybe we'll have you back again here before too long. So people are really appreciating what you're putting out.
Well, thank you. I was very glad to be here. So again, if anybody's interested, my main book that covers a lot of the stuff we talked about, if you don't mind me plugging my shamelessly.
Go ahead. Plug your book.
Survival Theory, a Preparedness Guide. So that is the preparedness guide I wrote here 4 or 5 years ago. Survival Theory 2 should be out here within the next year. So check that out. I highly recommend read Selko Begovic, The Dark Secrets of SHTF Survival. That's a good wake-up call. My website is griddownconsulting.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at griddownprepper, and on YouTube, I think it's at Jonathan Hollerman. So yeah, there's my website right there.
A lot of good stuff on here, and here he is in Montgomery, Alabama. Actually, there's Dr. Peter Vincent Pry behind him, and Ambassador Cooper here, who actually at one time was the head of the Strategic Defense Initiative Office, which look at this, guys. So a lot of stuff in here. There's books in here, a lot of good resources that y'all should check out. So check out his website, look at these books, media, here's his biography. Jonathan's real, guys. He's a real guy. He look at him standing up here on top of this mountain with his backpack. He's been a military veteran. Like I said, he taught to this elite force here. And he's quite the expert in these areas. So there's all kind of information in here. Check them out. Got an online store. So I highly advise you to check out his website, griddownconsulting.com. Griddownconsulting.com.
Thanks, Greg.
And I may put it in the share notes here. We'll stop the share. Come back here. And yeah, we're about to wrap up here tonight. But let's see, I'm going to go share that in the chat room. Daniel Twit shared it earlier. Let me see, I got to get back over to that part. So many things to hit here. Bang, bang. Anyway, I think that we've gone quite a while here. Hope it's not too long for most of you out there in YouTube land. But this has been packed with information. Jonathan, appreciate it. Appreciate all you that have watched. I appreciate all the viewers here. I appreciate you super chatters. You really help with this video. Who knows if I'll get it monetized or not. If I do, it may be down the road. And appreciate all the mods in here tonight who have been taking care of the chat and make sure it stays civil. We are a family channel here on Green Gregs, so we like to keep our chat civil and the discourse clean, and we like for everybody respecting each other. Should have said that earlier. So, guys, thank y'all for watching. We'll end the video now. That will terminate the live stream. So have an awesome night and be prepared to watch Dr. Peter Vincent Pry tomorrow.